Hey guys, it's your sporadically entertaining Darktide content creator Rusty Rockbird Randy here, and I wanted to take a break from essentially giving an overview of whatever fun build I've been playing to talk about something a bit different, Darktide itself. It goes without saying that Darktide is a fun game. Even when things were rocky at best around launch, it was still an extremely entertaining game to play where the setting, the music, and the moment-to-moment gameplay all came together to immerse you and distract you from areas where it might have been lacking. Since then, Fat Shark have done a tremendous job catching the game up to player expectations and in some cases even exceeding them. But if you're like most players, despite all their hard work, you maybe put in whatever a month or two of gaming looks like for you before burning out and having something else grab your attention. So as I see it, the big challenge with a game like Darktide is keeping players playing, and currently the best way that Fat Shark achieves this is simply by having something for the players to achieve themselves. Just by putting in a difficulty that players are going to need to work to reach is a great way to hook them, and the more obstacles in their way to achieve it, the better. Hitting level cap, designing or discovering an effective build, and crafting complementary gear to capitalize on it, and then give you a roster of 4 unique characters to do it over again with. But there's a problem here that stems from balancing. It's a cooperative game, so I'm guessing it's not very high on Fat Shark's to-do list. As long as nothing is so good that it trivializes the content, they're fine with, and I'd imagine most players are fine with, certain weapons or builds or characters outperforming the rest without any rush or public outcry to nerf anything like you'd have with a competitive game. The only way imbalances like this would be an issue is if players need to abuse these overtuned assets to beat the hardest difficulty, which is my guess as to why the hardest difficulty in Darktide, or Maelstroms on Damnation, are surprisingly easy. If you've got enough mechanical skill either from putting enough time into Darktide or learning from previous titles, you can effectively clear them with even the most esoteric of builds. Which also means that if you lack that mechanical talent but have well-crafted gear on a powerful build, you can also achieve that final goal of consistently clearing the hardest difficulty. Everyone's happy, except there's nothing left to achieve after that. I'm certainly not a player who needs a carrot to chase for me to enjoy a game, like a new difficulty to overcome or a new character to level in gear, but without a challenge to overcome, things will inevitably become stale, repetitive, and trivial. I'm not being pushed by the game to try anything else other than what I've already mastered, and you'll run out of ideas for fun new ways to challenge yourself on your own. In the end, you'll become too good at your favorite stuff for it to be satisfying anymore because there's no consistent challenge to overcome. Introducing a new difficulty to keep experienced players like myself invested would certainly work, but it would bring with it a whole host of problems due to, as I mentioned, balancing. There would be a huge section of the player base who could only compete in that difficulty by abusing the most overtuned characters, builds, and gear, which is never satisfying. It would bring balancing to the forefront as players would be clamoring for their own favorite weapons or characters or abilities to match the effectiveness of their outperforming counterparts. So unless Fat Shark wants to commit a whole lot more time into testing and balancing and monitoring every bit of their arsenal, it's not exactly an effective solution. Of course, the point of this video is that there is at least one solution that I would absolutely push for. It's elegant and would solve a whole host of problems, forcing players out of their comfort zones to try new things, to appreciate different builds and weapons, to adopt different playstyles. A solution so brilliant that wouldn't be hyperbole to call me a genius, but don't thank me just yet. It's not a wholly original idea. It comes from a completely different genre, roguelites. These types of games revolve around repeating the same content over and over with enough variation that every run stays fresh and interesting despite the inherent repetition. Some players might think that the modifiers of a Maelstrom or Fat Shark already implementing something like that, but I'm thinking of something more expansive, more engaging. Starting off with nothing but the lowest quality items that need to upgrade as you go, being able to choose your path on an overview map like a game of FTL or Slay the Spire, risking big challenges that might cut your run short for substantial rewards that could carry you to victory. Each node demarcating a smaller, truncated level with their own quirks and challenges. Search each level to pick up limited resources, giving more time for the game to throw waves of heretics at you. Gambling with resources on improvements entirely locked to that run, which might dump you with a weapon you have no experience with, forcing you out of your comfort zone. The overview map eventually converging to a hefty challenge at the very end that you hope you and your team skilled up and geared up enough to conquer. A proper challenge for any player. The possibility for a mechanically inept player to get the right combination of weapons and buffs to make them insanely powerful, or for a veteran player to pull out a win despite being lumped with a bunch of disparate tools to try and cobble together an effective playstyle. And I'm guessing there are going to be two main reactions to this. The first group is thinking that's a lot of work to try to implement into Darktide. So many different mechanics and assets even after cannibalizing what you can from what already exists. Worse, there's no guarantee that it would be fun. Players might just ignore it for what already exists. Without any proof of concept, something like this could be a complete waste of development resources. And I would never argue that it's an easy task, of course. Game development is difficult. In an ever-present dialogue that has recently been reignited by gamers' passionate love for Starfield, it prompted the design director and lead writer Emil Pagliarulo better known as his gamertag Peg Daddy, to voice his thoughts. Some have called it a Twitter meltdown, but I'd personally just label it more of an unhinged, passive-aggressive, I'm definitely not angry rant. In it, he shed some light onto the discourse of game development and player feedback. He wrote, "Funny how disconnected some players are from the realities of game development, and yet they speak with complete authority. I mean, I can guess what it takes to make a Hostess Twinkie, but I don't work in the factory, so what the hell do I really know?" This is an excellent argument because you definitely need to know how something is made to have an opinion on what it's like to consume. He goes on to preface everything he's about to say with a disclaimer that he gets it. He knows what it's like to spend money on a game that disappoints you and how much even in recent times he's wanted to go off on how awful a game is, but explains that he does it because he's in the industry and knows how difficult it is to make a game, which is something most people don't know. Did you know that making a game is hard? Wow. He tells us about how the people working on the game work hard. Wow. And no one sets out to make a bad game. Wow. And most developers are incredibly talented even if they produce garbage. Wow. Dropping some knowledge bombs. He goes on to explain that being a developer is a difficult job, which most people wouldn't understand because they're unemployed and have never worked a hard day in their lives. But the real point he's building up to is here. So sure, you can dislike parts of a game, you can hate on a game entirely, which, you know, I'm always glad when someone gives me permission to have an opinion. Here comes the but, though. Don't fool yourself into thinking you know why it is the way it is or how it got to be that way. He goes on to describe all the challenges that can be faced to explain why consumers shouldn't try to figure out what makes their favorite games good or their biggest disappointments bad. It's too nebulous, so they shouldn't infer or speculate or go off of words spoken by the people themselves in speeches that they now regret. They shouldn't notice troubling or infuriating patterns from specific people and the products that they help create. They should just accept that a product is what it is and not try to figure out what might have made it a dumpster fire to inform future purchases. Like who might have been responsible for certain things being the way they are, like the lead writer having any influence over the writing or the design director having some leverage on the design. He concludes with a somber reminder. Just know that the game you're playing is in some ways a freaking miracle in and of itself. Normal people have come together to work for years for one goal, to bring you fun and happiness. And really, I think this is the important part. People don't work in the most lucrative entertainment industry in existence for anything other than bringing entertainment and joy. Sure, it's worth more than $200 billion annually, but developers should be seen more as charity workers than anything else. They're only in it for spreading love. So when you spend your money, a value that reflects your own hard work in your own occupation and industry, and find that what you've purchased doesn't live up to the expectations you have for what your hard work is worth, maybe you should shut the fuck up. Because developers have a harder job than you, it's not something anyone does for money, so their work and their design processes and their decisions are above reproach. Sure, you cannot like it, but the moment you want to start criticizing, say, the writing, and point toward the guy in charge of the writing and his philosophies as a reason, maybe you should stop and go fuck yourself instead. So yes, I know it would be difficult. Of course, then there's the second main reaction to what I propose, which is somewhere along the lines of, I know what you're doing, you son of a bitch, I'm onto you, you cheeky little monkey. That's because this exact system already exists, just not in Darktide. It exists in Vermintide too. And if you haven't experienced it before, it is my absolute pleasure to show you the best way to play one of these styles of games. From Left 4 Dead to Payday to Fat Shark's other titles, I have never felt such satisfaction or compulsion to play than this roguelite-esque gauntlet, the Chaos Wastes. I think the best part about it is how well it lends itself to be played after you've already mastered the mainline content. Once you've maxed out a character and built the best weapons and are thinking, wow, I'm amazing at this game as you steamroll the hardest content. Then Vermintide comes along and is like, hey, you think you're good? What if we take away all your items and leave you to fend for yourself, and suddenly you have a real challenge again? You get to feel that thrill of being undergeared, underpowered, pushed to the limit against an onslaught that you're sure if you just survive will give you the rewards you need to beat the rest of the run, cramming the level 1 to 35 experience into an intense hour-long gauntlet. And all you get to bring with you are your talents, comparable to the skill tree in Darktide and basic bitch white rarity variants of what weapons you have equipped, taking away all your painstaking crafting from weapon modifiers to trinkets, the equivalent of curios, leaving you to grow and adapt or fucking die. First you need to pick from one of 4 different end challenges to overcome: Fortitude, Courage, Determination, or the Citadel of Eternity, each providing its own unique endgame trial, from a close quarter shotgun of enemy spawns with Fortitude to a labyrinth of endurance in the Citadel of Eternity, each one cursed by one of the gods for extra challenging modifiers while still leaving room for the others to curse maps leading to the end trial. There's old favorites like Nurgle who will blight entire maps and poison or hex enemies to explode in a poisonous cloud when they're slain. Then there's Slanesh with curses like no pickups on the map or sharing damage with nearby allies, and Snoochie that will have slain foes split into lesser enemies or lightning strikes from the sky that both damage you and buff enemies. Of course, then there's corn.
Weakness to butter. Got a battle in bloodshed.
Weakness to butter.
Once you choose a destination, you're brought to a map where you get to customize your path to get there, each giving a unique reward like critical chance or power.
Can I get that damage? We need bagels. Woo!
Or something only losers want, like block and push angle or cost reduction. On top of that, each map has modifiers with extra or fewer enemies like hordes or specials, and sometimes unique modifiers like extra coins used to buy upgrades along the way. Each of the maps are then procedural to a degree, leading you through a combination of areas you most likely have never encountered before. The incentive to spread out and find as many item drops and coins as possible, pushing back against the safety of sticking together. Each recognizable bit of a map compounding this by shifting around each time, locking different paths while opening others, making it far easier to get lost as you can no longer rely on having done the same map over and over to know exactly which way to go.
How'd you get up there? What am I doing with my life?
Adding to all this variation are the many altars found inside the maps, some hidden and easy to miss, offering ways to upgrade your weapons using the temper altar, buffing whichever weapon you currently have equipped to the power and rarity of the altar with random modifiers being imbued to your weapon. Of course, that's the expensive option. There are also randomized altars that will give you an upgrade melee or ranged weapon, but the result will be random. Not just exchanging modifiers you might have imbued onto your weapon, but swapping it out for a different one entirely, forcing you to change up your playstyle on the fly as your safe long-range spear or halberd might be exchanged for the intimately close chaos of double daggers or axes, which might also leave you with a melee and range combination that doesn't complement each other in the least, force you to rely on your allies to deal with certain threats. A risk that's paid off each time your overview map leads you to a shrine where you can spend those saved coins on unique buffs that can supercharge your effectiveness and turn you into a god, letting you exploit insanely broken powers like becoming completely invincible for 10 seconds with massive buffs after being pushed to the brink of death. They also offer extra modifiers, so the next map you'll enter that any player can buy will be shared amongst the team, sometimes being straight buffs to help power you through or risky challenges with big payoff.
If someone gets the miracle Smednir, I'm going to kill myself.
All of this leads to so much novel variation and excitement and fun that it will have you flying circles in the air with uncontrollable glee. Every run offering its own unique challenges that you're free to amp up simply by using the randomizing altars rather than relying on tempers to retain the weapons that you're comfortable with, and it would absolutely be an incredible addition to Darktide. The map modifiers are already more unique and varied with the different maelstroms. The weapon pools are universally more diverse with their perks and blessings being so much more impactful, and suddenly we can't razor focus our tree around exploiting a specific weapon unless we also want to take the hit to our currency by relying on upgrading what we've brought with us rather than exchanging our weapons for random ones. Rewarding players for being skilled with the entire roster of a character's weapons rather than being a master of their select favorites, forcing us to leave our comfort zones to try out new weapons and blessings in an effort to beat a run that will entirely change the next time we enter. A dream scenario for players like myself who have done maelstroms to death and are hungering for more challenge, more variation. Of course, until then, there's always Vermintide too, and if you haven't experienced it for yourself, I'd wholly recommend it. The only big warning I have is that, at least at the higher difficulties, with the far more melee-centric focus of the game, friendly fire is enabled for weapons outside of our melee roster, which not only includes bows and guns and staves, but also grenades.
I got a bomb over there.
Oh, and speaking of other games, have you guys played Starfield yet? I've heard from Vice that's a masterpiece, and from Esquire that's a cinematic masterwork, and from Windows Central that's an absolute triumph, and from Screen Rant that's an instant classic, and from Word of Mouth that's a disappointing piece of shit.
Alright, we need to get 53 more kills before ending this mission.
Oh, hey! Hey!
All right.
Thanks, guys!